There are more chairs if people want to sit down in the back so that you're all happy. Wonder if anybody's still in the parking lot. Should we just begin? The history of Lake Hortonia. This may be kind of a first that we've ever done anything like this. And we want to welcome you, and we're just thrilled to see so many people here. Isn't this wonderful that we're together? So Irene Walker, where are you? Right there. Irene Walker has been on the lake, and she'll tell you how many years. And my name is Susan Barnard, and I live in almost a 100-year-old camp. And I've been married to my husband for 54 years, and I came to this lake and said, oh, this lake goes with him. So I was very lucky about that. So Irene Walker, she's owned a beauty parlor here on our lake, and you married into this lovely dance hall. Bob is here. We had to really say, you've got to come. And we're so glad that you came too, because it was your parents.
I wouldn't miss a social.
It was your parents that started this, right?
No, but they were
Part of it. All right, so here's how we're going to run it. Irene, come on over here and get close to me like you know me. So we're so happy that you came. Irene has said that she's going to talk, and then if you have any questions, just raise your hand and speak as loud as you can. And if you see me helping her, she's having a little hearing problem. So I'm going to help her if she needs it. So I'm going to sit close by, and so if you see me helping her, that's what's going on. But I know you've spent many hours getting ready for this. And we thank you for your effort. This is just wonderful. You want to tell what we're doing over here?
I'm Shannon Bryant, and we started a Story of Place initiative a couple years ago. And thanks to Susan, this is like our first history talk. And she kind of got me going. And so Shelley and I are doing the audio and video today. Our first time, so hopefully it turns out well. And Irene has been gracious enough to use the microphone, even though probably not needed in this space. So Story of Place about Lake Hortonia, this is the first go of it. If anyone would like to do a talk or would like to do a short interview, please let myself know. Or if you'd like to show pictures, give any history that you have, even if you've been on the lake for like 2 years, we'd love to know your experiences. So we plan on just telling stories, so people's stories, and gathering around food is always a good thing to do. So, Susan?
We're ready for Irene.
Oh, Irene, thank you very much.
All right. Like Susan said, we really are interested in questions, so don't hesitate anytime during the talk. Bob's going to start. Okay, wait a minute. Begin with. Okay, so there's a dance hall poster, the salon poster, and then pictures of the dance hall, our house where we lived. These are the owners, okay, and these are my topics. So, and then we have the album. It has just different pictures. This is a picture of the only picture we have, if anybody ever has any other ones, of the inside of the pavilion. We have one. And then this is a picture, basically, for this purpose, is showing where the pavilion is going to be. So this was taken before 1924. So Bob's going to start out and explain things about
the origin,
the people, and how we're connected to this, to the owners.
right, like she said, we want to explain a little bit about the previous owners, how the origin of the pavilion actually came about. So we owned the pavilion for 27 years. My parents owned it for 13 years. So we have about 40 years of pavilion life in our history. Is that all right? Okay. Excuse me. So anyways, like she said, we want to invite in questions, but you might want to wait. I may be able to preempt a few of your questions by explaining a little bit about the people involved. Basically, there were two families involved in conceiving of the pavilion, the origin of it. The Fortiers, who lived up on St. John Road. Linda and John know the road that connects Route 30 to Burr Pond. And the Fortier family lived there, and the patriarch was Julius Fortier. He was probably in his 30s, and this was in 1922, roughly. He was married to Nellie, and they had two sons. And ironically, one of them, after he finished his career in Ohio, I think it was, moved back to Vermont and built a retirement home. And luckily, Irene got together with him before he passed away, and so she'll have quite a bit of, he helped us immensely with the amount of information that we got involving the pavilion. So anyways, he was a big part of it, but Julius is the one that was the start of it. He was, I guess you would, I always have trouble with that word. He was the entrepreneur. He came up with the idea and the vision. He saw other places like Bombazine and Dunmore that had pavilions and said, oh, Lake Hortonia should have one of those. So anyways, it was his idea. Now the other family involved were the Mallorys, and those were my relatives. Henry Mallory was my grandfather's uncle, and they lived in the house where Irene and I lived for 32 years, which is now Route 30 and the corner of Walker Grove Road. So Julius had the idea, but Henry had the property on the lake, which we see here. So anyhow, they got together, had some kind of a quasi-formal arrangement, and made some kind of a deal, and the pavilion was started to be constructed probably around 1924. We're a little shaky on some of the dates, but it's probably somewhere in that vicinity. So anyways, Julius and Henry got together and had a deal for the pavilion. Now, Henry had was a widower. He, and an invalid. The only picture we have of him, he's in a wheelchair on the lawn somewhere, and I don't think we have that picture with us. But anyways, and he had a daughter named Vella, which we all know, right, Barbara? So anyways, most of anybody that would have known Vella Mallory would have known her as Vella Plew, okay? She was first Vella Mallory Butterfield, her first husband, and then second, she married Charles Allen Plew from Orwell, so we all knew her as Mrs. Plew. And the connection, and it really is, even though this building is, or the concept of the building is 100 years old, really a lot of connections to present day. So Mr. Plew was actually Mark Young from your association, right? His grandfather. So anyways, that was the connection there. So anyhow, they got together, they got going with the construction, and well, I should digress for a minute and just look at this picture here, which shows the only picture we have that shows where the pavilion is going to be built. And of course, it's the location now of Dave and Janet Weaver's home. But it has to be predated to 1924 because obviously there's a cornfield where the pavilion should be. And a little bit of the history of the picture, which I think is kind of important. My grandfather, Mallory, and his brothers owned the Sudbury Inn, where Dave and Mary Ann have the creamy shop, okay? And and so this picture was part of that building. And my mother was actually born in that building in 1922. And so this picture was part of that building. It was probably on the wall in there somewhere when it was a hotel. You know, obviously, I don't remember seeing it there. But anyways, one way or another, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. The hotel was changing hands, and my mother happened to get in on the scene. She saw the picture and rescued it, so now we have it, which you know, is a wonderful thing, I think, because it's very important. It's the only one we have that would show that property. And now, is Jane Banks here tonight? No. No. Jane's uncle, Theodore Mickle, Ted and Henrietta Mickle, to probably most of us, he had a great expertise in antiques. He dated the picture the early 1900s. So we know the picture or the photograph was probably taken somewhere between 1900 and obviously before 1924. So anyways, that is the picture. Oh, okay, I should say a little bit about the pavilion itself before Irene takes over here. The original pavilion was not the one that you see in these pictures here, the sprawling building with 3,600 square feet and what I call the wings on the side. It was not that building. It was a much smaller building. The wings on the side were an addition. The porch and the kitchen on the southern end of the building were an addition. The stage and the women's bathroom on the northern end of the building were an addition. So it was much smaller. And something about the stage that might interest you, we found out that the original stage where the band played was a platform somehow positioned above where they were dancing. Don't know exactly how that would have worked, but you can kind of picture it, you know? My guess is when it came to a hot night in July and August, probably the addition of the stage came fairly quickly. That would be my guess. The other thing that's of interest is the women's bathroom. Now, I don't know if there's educators here or not. They love this word, oxymoron. Well, that's what the women's bathroom is, an inside outhouse. It met all the definitions of an outhouse, but it was inside the building. And I thought it was rather clever of the original proprietors because if a woman came and needed to use the bathroom, she would have had to buy a ticket and go across the dance floor to get to the bathroom. There was no outside entrance, you know. So anyways, probably Irene will talk about some of her interviews with some people, and then unless somebody has a real immediate question, we'll go on with questions. You want to sit here?
While we're on the subject of the bathrooms, where were the men's?
Okay.
Sorry.
The Weavers will appreciate this. The big oak tree down by the water has kind of a flat spot between the oak tree and the water. And there was an outhouse there, which I could tell you a couple stories about, but let's see how much time we have. But there was an outhouse there, and that one was a typical outhouse, but you could have access to it without buying a ticket. So, anyway, that's where it was. And there was no water. This is hard to believe, especially in today's world here. But there was no water in the pavilion until approximately 1960, when my mother and father added a men's and women's bathroom on the west side of the building. I didn't expect questions from you.
There'll be more. Yeah, Joe Fortier, Barb, you know, what's his daughter's name? Penny.
Penny.
You know Penny.
Yeah.
She still lives up on that road. So, and I don't know if she realizes even. If you get a chance to tell her that, you know,
I will. She can talk to you. You probably get answers.
although now Shannon has the original tape that I did of her, you know, interviewing her father. So, anyways, yeah, she can call me. So, but he was 85. That was 1998, and he was really sharp as can be. I mean, see, one of the things he said, and Bob may have mentioned it. Now this picture shows corn, but Joe said he asked Henry if he could plant potatoes, because, you know, apparently he would go to Brandon and sell the potatoes. And so Henry said, sure. And so then that's when he got the idea about the pavilion. And of course, this was right after World War II, One. And apparently, like Bob said, pavilions and people were starting to have cars, so they were able to move around more. So, and obviously it was a success because it didn't close till '65. So, and to begin with, they had dances on Wednesday and Friday. And then, obviously, it must be Wednesdays didn't work out very well. So then they had Friday. And then they would have, I don't know if it was Dunmore or Bombazine, would have a dance on Saturday. So there was a whole group of young people who would come to the pavilion on Friday and then go to the other one on Saturday, because there really wasn't a whole lot of entertainment around. So, and I was just talking to somebody the other day, and well, they're our age group, but she said, oh yeah, we went to the dances, and they went over to wherever, for the other one, so it was a big thing. Barbara, do you?
The Cove over at Lake Dunmore, and then there was one in Bombazine on 30, I believe.
Right, I think so
I
too.
don't remember that one. I remember the Cove, and that was Saturday night. So you're
So,
right.
did you actually come to some of the dances?
Oh yeah, this. Yes,
Ours.
Oh yes.
Did anybody else here?
My husband.
Oh,
My husband, he did without me.
and who else?
The ones on Hortonia? Or
Well, or any of them. Did you go to? Where'd you go?
the pavilion and the horseshoe?
In the horseshoe. Okay, what happened when they closed the pavilion in '65? Edgar, right? Prezo? No, Wilford. Okay, he decided that he wanted to continue, so he built the horseshoe on what's the road? Okay, yeah, you all know. So he built that one after the Hortonia one was closed. What the other interesting thing was that, I don't know if you looked at the dates. So originally, Henry and Julius started ownership in '24. And Vela, what happened was Henry died. Henry and Julius. Now, Julius was, like he said, he was 30 or 40. They both died before 27.
They were both dead within 3 years of the
Yeah. So, Vela took over the property from her father, and Nellie was Julius's widow. And she eventually wanted out. So Vela bought her out, and Vela sold it to his parents in 57. And then we bought it in 70. And Kiera Manalfi bought it from us in 97. We think '03. If anybody has any more accurate, we'd love to have date. It's questionable. And again, we think she sold it, she sold it to Jack Elliott in 203, or in that vicinity. And again, and Jack Orwell Bank owned it from 10 to 13, and then Weavers, now own it. So, okay. Thank God for
Irene?
Yep.
If it closed in 1965 and you bought it in 1970, did you buy the land or was the building still intact?
All right. When Henry Mallory owned, you know where we lived on 30?
Yeah.
He owned that. He owned the pavilion and all that land, and he owned all the cottages.
Got it.
And he owned some other land, but anyways, for this purpose, so again, what did you ask me again about?
I asked you, was the pavilion still standing when you bought it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Her first
Okay.
beauty salon was in the building.
That was my question. What were you using the building for if it wasn't for a dance hall?
Okay, at one point, soon after we bought it, I opened a salon in what was the kitchen.
Got it.
And then we built an apartment, a summer apartment, in one end of it. And then when I moved the hair salon to the house, we built another apartment. And then the rest of it was just being stored, for storage. You have to remember, we had, how many boats?
Too many.
12, 13 boats. Wooden, great big boats, and all kinds of paraphernalia and plumbing and you name it. So it was just basically used for storage.
Plus the people on the peninsula wanted to store stuff there.
Okay, in 206, the building was torn down, and there was a controlled burn by the Whiting Fire Department. So the building disappeared in 206. So it was there, up until then.
Was that under Jack Elliott then, when he bought it and tried to keep it, didn't he?
Which one, Jack?
Jack Elliott.
Yes. He intended to use it. And then he was a contractor. He decided it was going to be so expensive that he was better off taking it away. And so they burnt it. They finally.
A building with almost 4,000 square feet that had no foundation other than piers and a rock and a piece of ledge and so forth. He found to raise it up, and put a foundation was going to be. It was easier to start over.
So anyways, that's when he started. Then he started building the log cabin. And I'm not quite sure. That's when he started building it. So, did anybody notice? I know at least one person did. Ticket prices. We know what right here. Anybody else notice? A 48. Pardon?
1948, I saw the one.
One says 1948.
Yeah.
So we don't know. Okay. All right. The one known date says. Anybody want to take a guess? What? Not you. Anybody want to take a guess what the ticket price was in 1948?
25 cents.
How much?
25 cents?
Oh, you're under. It says 60 cents. And Bob says, what year do you think it was? He said you used to be able to come in.
Well, that was in I can remember.
I know
so
it
had to-
still.
Probably after maybe about the time that my folks took over in 1957. It was a big deal because you could buy a ticket, get a hot dog, and a soda for $1.
Think times have changed? I think so. Yeah. All right. One of the other stories that Joe told me, during Prohibition, people would come with their cars, and then they would hide their bottles on the edge of the property. Do you know where Grazio's property? Who is that? I don't know who's in there now. The north side of the pavilion, there were trees and shrubs all the way up. There, I think there still is some. Well, anyways, of course, they weren't supposed to have liquor, so the people would hide it in the woods, and the boys, Joe and his brother, would go over and take them. And so kind of annoy. And but what are they going to do about it? They can't call the police or something. Bob, do you remember the prices at the end of when you closed?
No, the one poster we have there is probably as close as anything.
Okay, the poster we have here says the poster itself says the entrance fee was 90 cents. There's a little ticket stub I found in Vella's house, which we were living in at the time. That one says 75 cents. So, and we don't have any dates for any of those. So, obviously the prices would have to increase. Okay, one of the big problems or the issues when you have a dance, and this, the floor, it was a hardwood floor. And one of the things Bob said, by the time I came, there was a lot of stuff on the floor. So you could tell where the old building was, the original building, and where they added the wings on. So the floor was different. But anyways, you have this huge space that you have to clean. So it was the job of Joe and his brother to clean it. So his father suggested that they built a box, and I can't remember now what. Say they had cloths or towels or something, and that's how they cleaned it. Well, the father suggested they put rocks in it, and I guess the boys felt that was too laborious, so they got their dog to sit in the box, and they pulled the dog around, and I thought it was rather clever. Bob, how did you have to clean the floor? Now we're talking 57 and after.
Yeah, well, of course, the dances were, in my lifetime, never more than, always on Friday nights. So Saturday morning was a big deal because we got up and called it picking up the grounds, the bottles, trash, whatever. So somebody had to sweep the floor, and we had about 3,600 square feet of hardwood floor. So that was the first thing we did once we got the grounds picked up. And then during the week, we would go back in like on a Thursday, and we had a huge dust mop. I thought I saw push broom around here somewhere earlier. But it was probably 36 inches wide, and we would dust with that, going back and forth, back and forth. Always carried a putty knife in your pocket because you never knew when you were going to find gum on the floor.
One thing I know, they finally stopped selling gum because of that.
But it didn't make any difference. Anyways, we would dust it Friday morning again, just prior to the next dance, and then we had a huge canister of wax like a 5-gallon driveway seal bucket type of size, with wax, and you sprinkled it just like you were sowing grass seed, you know. And that would be the last thing we would do before we walked out of the building, before we came back for the actual dance. And then the first dance, the people would come in, and I mean, that floor would shine, because the first dance, they'd be all over it, you know, and it would work the wax into the hard wood. So that was, you know, that was probably the biggest thing. Cleaning it was sweeping that floor, and then dust mopping it. At least twice during the week, we would dust mop it, you know. So.
One of the reasons I said that Joe was so sharp, when I started asking him about, well, he called it the electricity plant. It basically was a generator and batteries, and that's how they provided lights, because Bob doesn't think they had lights, electricity to the building, what, 60?
No, that was the water, no.
Okay.
I think the electricity came probably in the very late 40s,
Oh,
right around there, because,
yeah.
and because Barbara might remember, because she's a lot older than I am. I think the cottages got electricity probably around the same time, because I can just vaguely, I was born in 1944, I can just vaguely remember ice boxes in the
Yes.
cottages.
Yeah.
And some of the old refrigerators, which I don't think there's any of them left now, were 1948. So I think that was about when the electricity came on the peninsula, and I'm assuming, for lack of a better word, that the pavilion got it probably at the same time.
Yeah.
Before that, they ran on Delco batteries, apparently.
Wow.
But, so I asked Joe, because that's what he said, oh, they had Delco batteries, and I said, how can you remember? Now, mind you, that it was 80 years before that, because he was, no, 70 years. He was 85, and when his father died, or they bought the property, I'm not sure, it's real close. The boys were 14 and 16, so we're talking 70 years, and it's like, how can you remember? He said, we saw that Delco battery every week for years, you know, so he said, oh, I remembered what the name was, so. And then the other thing he talked about was low-cost mowing. Apparently they didn't mow back then, but anybody who knows Bob, that changed. He's the mowing champion of the state, probably. Anyways, but he said apparently the cars, or they were satisfied enough with the way it looked that they didn't mow. But I can't imagine. Everybody knows the space around the building, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine trying to mow that with a push?
Right.
Or a sickle, maybe. I don't. Anyway, so they were probably glad not to be doing it. All right. Bob talked about the outhouses, and then what do you think? You said water came in the 60s.
Probably 1960, roughly.
Shannon, can you pick him up when he's not talking on the mic?
It's preferable with the mic.
Oh.
So tell them about the bathrooms, the modern bathrooms.
Well, there really isn't too much to tell. They were added in 1960 on the west side of the building, a men's and women's bathroom. And then eventually we used the one side for the apartment and the other side for the beauty salon. Is that what you're getting at? But the building itself had no running water, even when we had dances. Can you imagine the health department now? Because we would go down to the pump house where Janet has painted a beautiful sunflower, and at that time there was a hand pump there, and we'd get a bucket of water with a dipper and bring it up, and it would be in the back there where we were cooking the hot dogs or whatever, and so forth. And I can also remember, I don't know if you want to get into it or not, I can also remember when there was no electricity in the building other than those batteries because we had an ice chest there. And we had to bring ice up every Friday morning to keep the sodas.
The sodas were where? No, your time, you had a cooler.
Yes, but I'm talking about the late 40s, maybe 1950, in that vicinity, just prior probably to getting the electricity. You know, there was, yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Did you have an ice house with sawdust on the peninsula?
Yes, we did. You will.
Remember that?
Okay,
Sorry
you
to
probably,
say.
I told you remember more than me. Okay, so for those of you here that are in Walker Grove, where the woodshed is, what we call the woodshed now, almost in that same print was an ice house. And I can vaguely remember my father in the winter, probably Mr. Plew, maybe Mark's father, I don't remember who exactly. I can vaguely remember them going out and cutting ice in the bay. I don't know how they got it over to the ice house, but they did. That ice, yeah, it's unbelievable, because that ice would last all summer in that ice house, and it was buried in sawdust. So sawdust is a wonderful insulation. And anyways, so we would take a couple blocks of ice out on a Friday morning, bringing it up to Janet's pump, and wash the sawdust off, continue it up to the pavilion, and then we would sit there with ice picks and work chunks of ice down around the sodas, you know, to keep them cold.
So at the beginning of when your parents had it, they still didn't have that ice chest that, anyways, that I remember was not electrified.
No, that was.
That one was.
I think the Plews probably got that. I'm guessing that probably came around 1950.
Okay. Because they had quite a large, it probably was this size.
That one was electric, no more chipping out.
Okay. So when they chopped the ice, you put it into what? A cooler of some kind? No.
Well, the cooler is like this table with a big 3 or 4 holes in it. You put a block of ice in one of those holes, chip all the little ice around, and then put sodas in and tuck them around the ice. And, you know, a fair amount of work, but it kept them cold. Remember, you only had to keep it cold for like 3 or 4 hours.
Right.
You mentioned about the hotter than hell, right, thing?
No, I did not.
Oh, he didn't. Okay. He was describing the pavilion itself inside, and so the very center, you know, the pavilion is traditionally comes sort of to a peak, like Pizza Hut, and so initially they had, now mind you, this is in the middle of the summer. They had a platform up there for the band. So you can imagine how hot it was. So our guess is that didn't last very long. And so somebody had carved in one of the timbers up there, hotter than hell. And I think, did it have a date on it? 1924?
25, I think.
25. Okay, so it lasted 1 year. And so what they ended up doing is on the north side of the building, which would have been facing Graziel's, they put the stage on. And that's where the electricity plant was, and that's where the ladies' bathroom was. So obviously the band was much more comfortable, but there. It must have been 100 and something up at the top. And then they had to have, what'd they do, take away the ladder? They had to have a ladder. Can you imagine they had to have a ladder to carry all their stuff up to this platform, right? And then they must have to take the ladder away because I can't imagine people, you know, hitting it. I can't remember, were there pillars in the building? No, there weren't 2 pillars, that's it. It was an engineering feat as far as I'm concerned. So there were 2 pillars for all this 3,000 plus square feet of, and obviously during a dance, they don't want a lot of obstacles, so I'm sure the ladder went someplace, so.
If you give me the, Irene, if you give me the thing, I can tell them a little bit about that.
About what?
The floor, the piers. So the two piers would be similar to the ones in the town hall here. And they constructed it with only those two piers so that the dancers wouldn't run into stuff when they're swinging around and all of that stuff. The building was constructed after the wings were put on. Kind of an amusing story. Was constructed with about 60 feet of water pipe, probably 1.5 to 2 inch water pipe, with a turnbuckle. And those ran the whole length, north and south of the building, just like this beam here would be. And it would go, and my father could take a pipe wrench and adjust with the turnbuckle if the building was unstable. Remember, it was sat on rocks and stumps. So it was not unusual if you had a crowd of 400 people to get things not quite as stable. And he would have to adjust them sometimes. So what happened was, every once in a while, in those days we called them woodchucks. Every once in a while, these young guys would have to chin themselves on one of those water pipes, okay? Well, my father, he was pretty patient, and he wasn't afraid to tell people, cut it out, but you couldn't stand right there the whole time. So 1 or 2 people chinning themselves wasn't a big deal, but you get 8 or 10 people chinning themselves on those pipes, it could influence the stability of the structure. So anyhow, he thought about it. So one week, he was very patient. He took, you'll know where this is going, he took automotive grease and he very patiently put it across the whole 60 feet of pipe on both sides. Well, I always worked in the kitchen. As Irene will tell you, I never liked to dance. So, but I liked working in the kitchen and selling sodas and stuff. So anyways, we could not wait for the next Friday. And sure enough, we were not disappointed. And it became kind of a joke in the kitchen as to how many people were going to come and borrow napkins. Because, but it did work. It solved the problem. So anyways.
Irene, we have 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and then we'll eat, and then we'll continue. 15 minutes.
What?
So we have 15 minutes more of you talking.
Okay.
And then we're going to eat, and then we can even continue afterwards.
We'll
Okay?
be done. Okay, one of the other things was, and it had to do, this album has, they're just personal pictures that we had, had. But one of them shows the hurricane of 1950. And what it did was the main part of the pavilion had this point in the center, and then what we call wings. But then the part going facing the cottages was a porch, an open porch. And then they, at one point, took the kitchen and extended the kitchen onto part of the porch. So it was an open porch. Well, during the hurricane of 1950, it took the roof off and apparently sent it across the lake. So, they brought it back, but there's pictures in there. Now, Bob was 6 years old at the time, so he's sitting on the edge of the pavilion on the porch, and there's no roof, and
I can remember them doing that. I can remember them doing that.
oh yeah, now he's only 6, but he remembers, it was a big thing to have this hurricane come through and tear off the roof, and I don't think the rest of the building had much problem.
And one of the things that was interesting was that when the hurricane went, number one, I slept through it all. My parents, I said I never heard a thing. But I do remember the aftermath. And one of the things that took the porch roof off, carried it all the way across the Weaver's lawn and down near the shore on the northwest corner of their lawn, there was a huge V in the earth. I remember seeing it, and I believe it hit with a V and flopped over into the water and then floated and blew across the rest of the park. And then I can remember my father and Mr. Plew, I have no idea who else was helping them. I can remember them going out in a boat. We had this little quarter-horse Neptune motor run. My father always joked about it and said I can row faster. You know. So it was probably a combination of the motor and rowing, but they somehow managed to get that back across to the shore by the edge of Weaver's Lawn. How they got it up across, I suspect probably Bill Steele came with his team of horses or something. I mean, there was a lot of weight, plus it was waterlogged, you know? So anyways, I remember that. And the other thing I remember, for those of you in the Grove, was that there were so many trees down, we could not walk down through the road. But the lake was much lower in those days because it was before the property owners got together and built the dam. And so I remember my mother and I going down where all of your docks are now and walking down the edge of the shore there, because it was in the fall, late fall, and the lake was really low, and it was like several feet of beach. I mean, my father used to go out there in the fall and rake where your docks are, you know, get the stones off from the summer and so forth. So anyways, there's so many trees down. So it did a lot of damage, and not just to our place. A lot of places around town were damaged.
The other thing, for those of you who hadn't actually gone to a dance, if it was enclosed like this and you had 300-400 people, on that note, the other thing, I think it was Joe, must be, he said the largest crowd they ever had was 700 people after World War II. I don't know if it, you know, that building was 700, and he said the Depression didn't seem to make any difference as far as the crowd that came. Okay, getting back. So, you know, they obviously didn't have air conditioning, so the back side was solid, but let me see,
Except for the stage, the backside was solid.
You could open those windows. Okay,
Except
but
for
on
where
the
the-
sides, I'll call them flaps. It was just a rope and pulley, but part of it was cut out so that every dance, they would open it up and the flap would go up and be secured so that some kind of breeze could come through.
And the lower part would go down. It was a lower,
Oh, the lower part too? Oh,
and it was all wired. Because of course it was a big treat for people to see if they could climb over the wire and
Sneak in.
I never got to go to a dance. They were all closed. It was closed before we got married.
Can you talk about what kind of dances they had,
Oh.
and what kind of bands they had?
Sorry. Okay. We're just assuming. Okay, it's
Yeah.
square
Well,
dancing.
hear
Mostly it was square dancing.
Okay,
And not, there's a different kind of square dancing going on right now. Western, maybe the other one. These were just, I don't know. And then they would have round dances, part of it too, right?
Yeah, they'd have some slow dance with the band, slow dances. They would
Right.
have slow dances. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was square. That was the thing, big
Because
thing.
I remember going to what must be the building that you were talking about that was built after, in the late 80s.
Horseshoes, yeah.
Where they had square dances.
Right. I think they had the same, in fact,
it's pretty standard format.
yeah,
Yeah. So
I
that was what it was like.
You had three round dances, they called them round dances. You had 3 round dances and a polka, and then a square dance with a set of 3 dances, and then they go back and forth.
I suspect Dunmore was the same thing. That just was, if you had a pavilion, except I'm not sure on Bombazine, because Bombazine, big bands would come. So I don't think big bands were playing square dances. So I don't know if there was another pavilion for square dances, but anyway, but I'm quite sure Dunmore and these and Hortonia certainly had squares. I never even thought that. Okay, hold on.
There was a square dance called the Mockingbird, I think.
Oh, yeah, I'm quite sure.
And you could,
Yeah.
you get to kiss and my cousin Linda, her uncle built 2 camps on the southeast part of Hortonia. Warren Hoadley was his name. She had her first kiss doing that dance. And so I think if he's here tonight.
It was a big courting. I mean, there were very few, in the 20s or 30s, there were very few places you could go. I mean, I don't even know if they had movies. Whatever. It was a lot of people say, oh, I met my,
Right.
my husband and my wife at the dances. So,
Well, I'm right across the lake from there. So I grew up every Friday night listening to the music and wanting to be able to go. And my aunt in 1953 had met her husband-to-be. They got married in 54. They met at the dance hall.
So my parents said, when you get to be a senior in high school, you can go. I got to be a senior in high school, and that was the summer it closed.
So I remember that, I think, Bob, there was a band, the Ayana Zone Brothers, I think the name was. Penny and I used to follow them.
Yanni.
Yanni, okay, and they were,
Napoleon Yanni.
yeah. and then they had the caller and another band, fiddlers, right, for the square dancing?
Yanni band played there for years and years.
Yeah.
My mother and father took over. They hired a band from Rutland called Burns Martin,
Uh-huh.
and they played for 2 or 3 years, and then we had Prezos. We formed a
That's-
partnership
yeah.
with them, and they were part of the dance and the band and so forth, and that was...
And that's why they went to the horseshoe, or that became the horseshoe.
Well, yeah, right.
And then-
Wilford was not going to, he had no intentions of building a dance place until my mother and father decided they were close, not gonna happen anymore, so.
Right, yeah. And I just wanted to say that at home, there's a national park called Glen Echo. It has a sort of a replica dance hall, and they have a lot of historic callers. And one is Pinky Johnson, and I think, did you say that he actually called at the dance hall periodically?
He was from Lake Dunmore, actually. He did
Really?
work Cove Point.
Yeah.
And he did at our place, but he definitely worked there for 2 or
But
3 years.
he's a big deal in the
Really?
calling of square dancing.
We had Johnny Blackburn, do you remember him? He was a blind man,
Oh,
blind
no,
caller.
really?
He was fantastic.
They eventually closed, if I understood the story right, because I think drugs were coming in, and people, of course, 1965, people had cars, and they were traveling, so this was not the big entertainment that it was years before. So they could see it going, that it wasn't going to continue, and good Lord works in mysterious ways. His father died the next year or so. So it was, Vi had all she could do to manage, and she couldn't by herself, the cottages, say nothing if she had the pavilion too to run. So anyways,
I recall stopping in at the pavilion for a couple of years, and there was a young... I recall stopping into the pavilion a couple of years in a row, and there was a young woman who had a daughter who had been injured during childbirth, and she was remodeling the place. And I wondered what happened to her and how long she was there and what... Does that ring a bell?
the woman who bought it from us that's who you're talking about. Is that who he's talking about?
I suspect he's talking about Kiara.
Era.
Yeah. She bought the place. She had a disabled daughter who was in a wheelchair. And she bought it basically for the daughter. And she was remodeling it for handicap, and I think it was going to be year-round. Well, I guess to make a short story, she had custody of the child at that point. There was a custody battle, and her husband they weren't together, got custody of the child, and she gave up on there was no reason to remodel it anymore. So she married a lawyer, Pulteney, maybe?
Manchester.
Oh, Manchester. And that's all we know. That, as far as we know, she's still around. So, okay. Any other questions before we eat? We can answer questions afterwards. So.
Well, I don't have a question, but I just, Bob and Irene were very nice, and they put together a binder, and they gave it to us, and it gives some history on the property, which is a lot of what's being talked about today. And I believe this article was in that binder, but I also found on the internet, there's a story, and everybody's talking about the horseshoe, which was the predecessor to this, or the follower. So there was a girls' camp, and it was either on Bombazine or BB or Echo, I can't remember, BB.
Lane.
And they were dismantling that, and they sold the dining hall, and somebody, the Prezos, I think it is.
Yes.
They dismantled that building, and that's what the horseshoe is. They rebuilt it on that site. Quite interesting.
Yeah.
I know that I'm so happy that so many people came. When we started this, I thought we'd have it at my camp. Thank goodness we didn't do that. This is just wonderful, and I think it's just the start. I have a few announcements. First, let's thank Irene and Bob.
I am thrilled that people are interested, and hopefully they're carrying it further, because unless somebody is interested, it is all going to disappear. So we're thrilled to be here. So
Yeah. Well, Sandy Rice, where are you? She's back here. We kayaked together, and she was telling me, that's how I heard. And I thought, I can handle this. This is easy. So I'm really pleased that she came. What's going to happen now? First of all, if someone did not bring their plates or their silverware or cups, as a teacher, I have you covered. It will give people 5 minutes to get everything they want out there so it's perfect. Irene and Bob are going to go first because they talk, but I'll tell you when we're going to begin, and we'll go by tables since we have such a big crowd. So, what? Eggs? Oh, there's an egg thing here. There are some deviled eggs, and if there's a little red on it, it means they're spicy.